with greatest element on right side. Giving an array R, replace every element in the array with the greatest element among the elements to its right and replace the last element with -1. After doing so, return the array. So let's go through this example. The example is this array, and we are supposed to replace every single element in the array with the biggest element, greatest element on the right side. So what is the greatest element on the right side of 17 is 18. So we are going to replace 17 with 18. And now when we go for 18, what is the greatest element on the right side? It's going to be 6, so we replace it with 6. What is the greatest element on the right side of 5? It's 6, so we replace it with 6. What is the greatest element on the right side of 4? It is still 6, so we replace it with 6. What is the greatest element on the right side of 6? Is 1, so we replace it with 1. On the right side of 1 there is nothing, and as it has mentioned in the question, we replace the last element with -1, so we replace it with -1. So if this is the case that we have only one element, we just replace it with -1. So let's see how we can solve this problem. For solving this problem, as this hint is mentioning to us, is like we should loop through the array starting from the end, and it also says keep maximum value seen so far. So let's see how we can do that. Let's write an example here first so we can go through that example for better understanding. What was the number here? So let's use this example here. Okay, so let's write the code. So first thing first, we need to keep the greatest element for ourselves, and as we have the hint here, we are going to iterate from the end to the beginning. And for doing that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the last element as the biggest element of the list, the most right biggest element of the list. And then I'm going to update the last element with -1 because the question has mentioned that the last element is going to replace with -1, so we can do that like this. And then we are going to use a for loop to iterate over the array. But how am I going to define the range? We are going to iterate from the end of the array to the beginning of the array, and we know we have already used we have put -1 for the last element, so we don't need to iterate over this. So what we are going to do, we are going to iterate over the range from length of the array. It's going to be -1, but we are going to make it -2 because we have already replaced this one with the -1, right? And then -1 for iterating from the end to the beginning. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to temporarily save the value that we have in this before replacing it, because we don't consider this when we are finding the most right element, and we are going to replace it with the most biggest most right element. But we have to save it somewhere, so I'm going to store it somewhere to keep it for later. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to update this with the greatest element that I have so far. So at index I is here right now. Let me tell you where I is here right now. So the biggest element to the right side of 6 is 1, which we have stored it here. So I'm going to replace that with the greatest element, right? So now the list is going to be something like this. So we have -1 here, and now this is going to be 1, right? And then the I is going to be pointing at this index, but we need to update the greatest as well. We are going to say if the greatest is smaller than the temp that we had here, if it is smaller than the temp, we are going to update the greatest equal to the temp. And we are going to return array at the end. Okay, let's go through this example and see. So we have replaced this with -1, and now we have replaced 6 with the greatest element to the right, which was 1, which we had it stored here. And then now we have 4 here. Now we have updated the greatest element from 1 to 6. Now the greatest element, I will keep the greatest element here. Now the at the beginning greatest element was 1, and then we update the greatest element to 6 now, right? And now we are going to see what is the greatest element. We are going to replace 4 with 6, which is the greatest element. Now this is going to be 6, and now we are going to check if 4 is bigger than 6, which is not. So what I'm going to do, we just iterate over, and greatest element still is going to be 6, and then I is going to point at 5, and we are going to see it's going to point at 5. And now we are going to see what is the greatest element to the right of this array. It is 6, right? So 5 is going to be replaced with 6. And is 5 bigger than 6? No, it is not. So the greatest element still stays 6. And then I is going to point at 18. So we are going to see what is the greatest element after 18. We know it's going to be 6. So we are going to replace 16 with 18 with 6. And what is the greatest element? Is 18 bigger than 6? Yes, it is bigger than 6. So we are going to update the greatest element to 18. And now we move I to 17. What is the greatest element what is the greatest element after 17? It is 18. So we are going to update this. It's going to be replaced with 18, and voila, we are done, and we are going to return the array. The time complexity is linear because we have to iterate over the array, and the space complexity is constant. Thank you.